The sound that would haunt Chloe Anderson's dreams for years wasn't a scream or a shout, but the crisp, condescending clink of her mother's champagne flute against her cousin's. A sound that pierced the humid air of their backyard in Macon, Georgia, during Chloe's own high school graduation party. A party that should have been a celebration of her top 5 percentile finish and full scholarship to state college, but had instead become a public tribunal. Standing there in her simple, discount store dress, the one she'd carefully ironed that morning, Chloe felt her smile freeze as her mother, Patricia, a woman whose love had always been conditional on achievement, raised her glass not to her, but to her cousin Jessica, a community college student already engaged to a boy from a good family. To Jessica, Patricia announced, her voice carrying over the chatter of relatives and neighbors. Who understands a woman's real place, building a family, not chasing fantasies? Unlike my Chloe, she continued, her eyes sweeping over Chloe with a dismissive flicker. Who thinks books are a career? Let's be honest, sweetheart. You're soft. You're emotional. You'll never have the spine for a real career. Never wear a uniform that commands respect. You'll never succeed in anything that requires grit. You're meant for quiet, little jobs. You'll amount to nothing. And it's a mother's duty to say it before the world does. The backyard fell into a stunned, complicit silence, broken only by Jessica's smug, pitying smile. Chloe felt the heat of 100 eyes on her skin, the weight of the scholarship letter in her pocket. Turning to ash, her vision blurring with hot, helpless tears that traced paths of shame down her cheeks. And in that moment, as her mother's prophecy hung in the Georgia air like a verdict, something inside Chloe, the last fragile thread connecting her to the need for parental approval, snapped cleanly, silently. She didn't run. She turned with a mechanical slowness, walked past the buffet table laden with food she'd helped prepare, through the screen door that slammed shut behind her like a full stop, up to her childhood room that now felt like a museum of her own inadequacy, and with hands that trembled not from sadness, but from a cold, gathering fury. She packed a single duffel bag with essentials, left the scholarship acceptance letter, torn neatly in half on her bed, and slipped out the back gate as the party laughter resumed, her heart a drum of solitary, echoing resolve. The Greyhound bus to Atlanta that night was a rolling tomb, the other passengers' faces blurred by her silent, streaming tears. The lights of Macon shrinking behind her, each mile a step away from nothing, and towards something she could not yet name, arriving in the vast, indifferent anonymity of the city, with $412 in her pocket, the ghost of her mother's voice her only companion. The first year was a study in survival's grim arithmetic. A dingy room in a boarding house that smelled of stale grace and despair. A job cleaning office buildings from midnight until dawn. The chemical sting of industrial cleaner in her nostrils. Her body aching with a fatigue so deep it felt spiritual. Her diet a rotation of instant noodles and store canned beans. The loneliness a cold, constant presence in her chest even amidst millions. She moved through Atlanta like a ghost, working a second job as a daytime waitress in a noisy diner where customers' snaps and condescension were a daily echo of her mother's tone, saving every quarter and dime in a coffee tin labeled "Scape," her only solace the public library's silent halls where she'd read not for pleasure, but for strategy, poring over biographies of pioneering women in the FBI, the Secret Service, the Diplomatic Security Service, studying the paths to authority, her hunger for more than food becoming a focused, burning thing. When Atlanta's opportunities dried up, she followed the bleak migration of the struggling to the sun-bleached strip malls of Phoenix, Arizona, where the heat was a physical weight, and the jobs were just as transient. Data entry in a windowless cubicle farm, nighttime inventory at a cavernous warehouse. Each role teaching her the architecture of American obscurity, the art of being overlooked. Her mother's words. Quiet, little jobs. A taunt she metabolized into fuel. Her exterior calm, belying the furnace of determination building within. Phoenix turned to a stint in Denver, where the mountain air did nothing to lift the chill in her soul. A job as a hotel concierge, where she mastered the art of smiling service, while dying inside. Watching men and women in sharp business suits or official uniforms move with an authority she coveted. They're bearing a silent rebuke to her own invisibility. And it was there, in a Denver library, reading a pamphlet on federal law enforcement careers, that the vague something she was moving toward crystallized into a single, daunting word: special agent. The path was not for the soft or emotional, the pamphlet warned. It was for the disciplined, the resilient, the patient. She looked at those words and saw not a barrier, but a blueprint. The next 5 years became a single-minded campaign waged in silence, using her meager savings to enroll in online criminal justice courses. Studying until her eyes burned after double shifts. Her social life a barren wasteland. Her entire existence funneled into improving her mind, her body, her eligibility. Running miles in worn-out sneakers in the dark. Practicing interviews in the mirror. Building a resume of relentless, unglamorous work. The day she submitted her application to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, her hands were steady, her heart a calm, determined pump. She was no longer the crying girl from Macon. She was a candidate, and when the acceptance letter came, she held it, allowed herself one single, shuddering breath that was part sob, part victory cry, before the real work began. The training in Glencoe, Georgia, was a controlled hurricane designed to wash away the unworthy, a symphony of shouted instructions, punishing physical tests, complex legal briefings, and psychological stress that probed every vulnerability. Chloe did not just endure it, she thrived. The emotional neglect of her childhood had built a wall behind which she could retreat to find calm. The public humiliation had calloused her to external judgment. She shot with a calm, clinical precision that topped her class, mastered constitutional law, excelled in crisis simulation, her quiet intensity earning the wary respect of instructors, who noted her file simply. Unshakable. Leads by doing. She graduated not with fanfare, but with a quiet certainty, pinning the badge of a special agent on her crisp, new suit. The uniform of the Department of Homeland Security, her first posting in the bustling field office in Seattle, a world of gray rain and complex financial crime investigations. Her career was a testament to meticulous, quiet accretion, the long, patient hours tracing illicit funds, the cultivation of sources, the careful building of cases that led to arrests that never made the news but strengthened the fabric of the law. Each successful investigation, a brick in the fortress of her professional reputation. She earned promotions not through politics, but through a granite reliability, her authority growing as she led small teams, then larger task forces, her name spoken with respect in the halls of the Seattle Federal Building, her personal life still starkly minimal, her energy devoted to the work, to the slow, steady construction of a life her mother could not have imagined. She bought a small, neat condo with a view of the Puget Sound, a car that started every time, a wardrobe of tailored, professional clothes, each purchase a silent, satisfying negation of her past of lack. The call that would set the final stage for her silent reckoning came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her unit was assigned to provide security and logistical oversight for a regional Homeland Security conference for private sector partners, and the venue, due to last-minute logistics, had been moved to a convention center in Atlanta, Georgia. The primary liaison from the hosting committee, the coordinator for all the corporate attendees, was listed as Patricia Anderson, now a project manager for a large security firm. Her mother, Chloe, accepted the assignment with the same detached professionalism she applied to any case, her pulse steady. For this was not a reunion, it was an operational detail. She arrived at the Atlanta conference not as a daughter, but as Supervisory Special Agent Anderson, in the authorized dark blue uniform of her service, her badge polished, her hair in a severe, professional bun, her posture radiating a calm, unimpeachable authority. The opening session was in a vast, carpeted hall. Chloe stood at the side of the stage, scanning the crowd of corporate executives and local officials as her colleagues spoke. And then she saw her. Patricia Anderson, dressed in a fussy, expensive suit, was shepherding a group of attendees to their seats near the front, her demeanor one of self-important bustle. Her eyes swept the stage, passed over the uniformed agent, and then snapped back, locking onto Chloe's face. The change was instantaneous and total. All the color drained from Patricia's face, leaving her makeup stark and garish. Her lips, parted to give an instruction, froze. Her hands, clutching a tablet, fell slowly to her sides. Her eyes widened, not in recognition at first, but in sheer, disbelieving shock traveling from Chloe's face down to the badge on her chest, the nameplate, the insignia of rank on her shoulders, and back to her eyes. The same eyes that had once wept in her backyard, now clear, calm, and utterly unreadable. Time seemed to suspend in the space between them. Chloe held her mother's gaze for 3 long seconds, her expression one of polite, professional blankness, the expression she used for strangers. She gave no smile, no nod of recognition, no flicker of the past. She simply observed, as she would any attendee, before turning her attention back to the podium. From her periphery, she watched as the full comprehension hit her mother like a physical blow. Patricia's knees seemed to buckle slightly. She groped blindly for a chair and sank into it, her tablet clattering to the floor unnoticed. Her hands came up to cover her mouth, but it was too late. Her face, that mask of perfected control, crumpled entirely. Shoulders hunched, she began to cry, not delicate tears, but silent, heaving sobs that shook her frame. The tears smearing her makeup, as she stared unseeing at the patterned carpet. The reality of her daughter, the one she said would wear no uniform, would amount to nothing, would never succeed, standing before her as the literal embodiment of federal authority, rendering her own life's narrative a pathetic fiction. The people around her shifted uncomfortably, whispering, but Patricia was lost in a private vortex of shattered pride. Chloe completed her security sweep, conferred quietly with a colleague, and exited the hall via a side door. Her duty done. She did not seek her out afterward. She did not answer the 3 frantic voicemails that later appeared on her private cell phone, messages choked with tears and garbled apologies. The revenge was complete. It had been delivered not with a shout, but with a presence, not with an accusation, but with an achievement, not with violence, but with impeccable, lawful service to her country. Her mother's tears were not her victory. Her victory was the uniform she earned, the respect she commanded, the life she built with her own 2 hands, and unbreakable will. In the quiet of her hotel room that night, looking out at the Atlanta skyline, Chloe felt no elation, only a profound, settled peace. The crying girl in the yellow dress was finally, irrevocably, laid to rest. She had taken the nothing she was given and built herself into an American something. A woman of substance, of quiet strength, of dignified power, proving that the most lasting monuments are built, not from the bricks of others' approval, but from the silent, relentless mortar of one's own resilient spirit. The notification was the quietest, most digital form of disavowment. Message not delivered. Isabella, easy. Vance stared at the stark green bubble on her phone's screen, the final text to her mother. a hesitant, "Happy Thanksgiving, I hope you're well," glowing back at her, blocked. And in that sterile, silent rejection, she replayed the scene that had led her here, the scene that had occurred 6 months prior in the overly perfumed living room of her childhood home in Scranton, Pennsylvania, during a family intervention, called not for a drug problem, but for her ambition. Surrounded by her mother Diane, her father Frank, and her golden child brother Mark, a newly minted accountant, Izzy had tried to explain her acceptance into a federal internship program, a foot in the door to a career in national security, and her mother had laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You. Insecurity. Isabella," you cried when the dog barked. "You're not made of the right stuff. You'll never wear a uniform that doesn't have a fast food logo on it," Diane had said, sipping her wine, while Frank nodded along, adding, "Be realistic. Get a sensible job. You'll never succeed in that world. You amount to a nice, quiet life, not a spectacle." Mark had just smirked, scrolling on his phone. The intervention had ended with an ultimatum: drop the ridiculous fantasy and take the receptionist job Mark had lined up at his firm, or be cut off. Izzy had left that day, her heart a stone in her chest. And now, months later, having chosen her path, the blocked message was their final, wordless verdict: "You are nothing to us." She sat in her shared apartment in Baltimore, the sound of her roommate's TV a distant buzz, the cold certainty of her total aloneness wrapping around her. And for the first time, she didn't cry. The well of tears had run dry, replaced by a glacial, clear resolve. She packed what little she owned that wasn't secondhand, withdrew her meager savings, 237.86, and bought a bus ticket south, not to anywhere specific, but simply away. The hum of the engine a mantra of escape, her family's prophecy of failure. Now a fossil she carried, not as a burden, but as evidence of what she must overcome. The city that became her anvil was Atlanta, Georgia, a place of relentless heat and indifferent sprawl. Her first home was a cot in a faith-based shelter where the prayers felt like echoes in a cavern. Her first job cleaning medical offices after hours, the smell of antiseptic and dread clinging to her clothes, her body a constant ache of fatigue, her diet a careful calculus of ramen and canned vegetables. The loneliness so profound it had its own sound, the silent hum of a fluorescent light in an empty room. She moved through Atlanta like a shadow, taking a second job as a night dispatcher for a taxi company, listening to the frantic voices of the city through a crackling headset, saving every spare cent in an envelope marked "The Suit," a reference to the crisp, anonymous uniform of authority she saw in her dreams. When Atlanta's opportunities proved as hollow as her stomach, she followed a rumor of cheaper rent to Memphis, then to Kansas City. Each city a lesson in American perseverance. Each job, warehouse picker, hotel night auditor, data entry temp, a masterclass in being the invisible, replaceable cog her family assumed she'd be. But within that anonymity, Izzy was undergoing a metamorphosis, her exterior calm a hardened shell protecting the forge of her will, her hunger for purpose becoming a singular, guiding star. She spent her free hours not in bars, but in public libraries, using their computers to enroll in online courses in criminal justice and political science, her eyes gritty from screen glow after double shifts, her mind absorbing the principles of the U.S. Constitution, crisis management, and protective intelligence, her savings slowly growing, her body hardening from nightly runs and calisthenics in her tiny room. The path she had chosen, the one her mother had mocked, was the United States Secret Service, not for the glamour, but for its unparalleled reputation for discipline, precision, and silent, unwavering loyalty. A loyalty she desperately wished to transfer from a family that rejected her to a country that might not. The application process was a 2-year odyssey of patience-written exams, panel interviews, Background investigations that dug into the very family who had discarded her. Polygraph tests that asked about her loyalties. And through it all, the ghost of that blocked text message was her motivator. The day the thick envelope arrived, bearing the seal of the Department of Homeland Security, and her orders to report to the James J. Rowley Training Center, she held it in her trembling hands in her Kansas City efficiency apartment, and for the first time in years, she wept, not tears of sadness, but of release, of a long, held breath finally exhaled. The training was a deliberate, systematic dismantling of the civilian self, a relentless barrage of physical endurance tests, defensive tactics, firearms mastery that required not just skill but absolute mental control, emergency medicine, counterfeit detection, and protective intelligence simulations that stretched for days with minimal sleep. Izzy did not just endure it, she synthesized it. The emotional abandonment of her childhood had taught her self-reliance. The familial rejection had inoculated her against the need for approval. She shot with a calm, mechanical accuracy that was noted in her file, mastered the intricate dance of a protective formation, absorbed the dry legalese of financial crime investigation. Her quiet, observant nature making her a natural at surveillance detection. Her instructor's evaluations read, Vance I. Operates with a quiet intensity, unshakable under stress. A planner. Graduation. The moment she first put on the iconic dark suit, white shirt, and tie, clipping the lapel pin to her jacket, was a feeling not of euphoria, but of profound arrival. The first piece of a new identity snapping into place with definitive finality. Her career began not at the White House fence, but in a field office investigating complex financial crimes, tracing the digital footprints of fraudsters, a painstaking, unglamorous work that suited her meticulous nature. She was the agent who volunteered for the overtime, who built the link analysis charts that connected seemingly unrelated shell companies, who cultivated sources with a patience that felt like a superpower. Her personal life remained starkly minimalist. A small apartment, a reliable car, her energy and loyalty given entirely to the mission, to the slow, steady construction of a professional reputation as someone who was relentlessly competent and unflinchingly ethical. Promotions came, as they do for those who outwork and outlast, from a rookie agent to a case agent on a multi-district task force, her authority growing as quietly as her investment portfolio, each successful case a brick in the fortress of her self-worth. The assignment that would orchestrate the final, silent act of her revenge was not a choice, but a duty. Her protective detail experience had grown, and she was assigned to the advance team for a visit by a senior cabinet secretary to Philadelphia, a short drive from Scranton. The visit included a major policy speech at the Philadelphia Convention Center, an event that would be covered live by C-SPAN and local news outlets. Izzy, now a shift leader on the protective detail, coordinated security logistics, her focus absolute, her professionalism airtight. The day of the speech, she stood post near the stage, her suit impeccable, her earpiece in, her gaze perpetually scanning the crowd and the periphery, the embodiment of controlled vigilance. The speech was broadcast live on local Philadelphia news, which, she knew, was the channel her parents watched religiously. Halfway through the secretary's address, the camera, panning the stage, lingered for a brief, 5-second shot on the serious-faced agents flanking the podium. There, clear as day, in the right corner of the screen, was Isabella Vance, her face a mask of professional focus, her Secret Service pin gleaming on her lapel, her posture radiating an authority that was both quiet and absolute. At that exact moment, in a well-kept split, level house in Scranton, Diane and Frank Vance sat in their recliners, the local news on as background noise. Frank, about to take a sip of beer, froze. Diane, knitting in her lap, looked up, Their eyes locked on the screen, on the familiar yet utterly alien figure of their daughter. The shock was physical, a vacuum that sucked the air from the room. Diane's knitting needles clattered to the floor. Frank's beer bottle slipped from his fingers, soaking the carpet, unnoticed. They stared, unblinking, as the camera held the shot. As their daughter. The one they said would wear a fast food uniform. The one they said would never succeed. The one they had blocked and erased. Stood guard over a member of the United States cabinet. The reality of it, the sheer, unimpeachable proof of their error, hit them not as a wave, but as a slow, crushing collapse. Diane's hand flew to her mouth, a low, choked sound escaping her throat before it crumpled into silent, heaving sobs, her shoulders shaking, tears of sheer, devastating shame and regret streaming down her face. Frank just stared, his face ashen, his own eyes glistening, the arrogant certainty of a lifetime evaporating under the television's glow. They saw it all. The suit that was a uniform of the highest order, the success they had declared impossible, the sheer, monumental amount she had amounted to. In the convention center, Izzy felt no psychic tremor, no satisfaction. She was working. She completed her shift, oversaw the dignitary's secure departure, and filed her reports. It was only later, in her hotel room, as she scrolled past a missed call from an unknown Scranton number, and a voicemail notification she would never listen to, that she felt it, a deep, expansive, and utterly quiet peace. The girl who had been blocked, erased, and deemed nothing was gone. In her place stood an agent of the United States Secret Service. The revenge was complete, legal, and dignified. Written not in angry texts, but in a lifetime of disciplined choices, broadcast not on a family group chat, but on the national news. She had taken there, nothing, and built a life of profound purpose, proving that the strongest foundations are often poured in silence, and that the most powerful vindication is a life lived so well, it forces even those who erased you to see you, finally, for who you truly are.